Hi, and welcome to this video on Navision 3.56. Hey, I'm Eric, and in this video I'm going to show you the grandfather of Business Central, also called Navision. Actually, this product was first called Navigator, and it was actually called IBM Navigator because it was built for IBM. So the first version came out in '87 as part of the ability to offer an accounting system that would use the new IBM PS2 computers and token ring network and all that. And in 1990, version 3 came out with a built-in development system, with a built-in language, and a lot of the stuff that we now have in Business Central started at that point. So what I'm going to show you today is basically the grandfather of Business Central. So I want to show you where the product came from. I want to give you some insight into what we actually worked with 30 years ago. So let's get started. And this video is going to be different. Let me get rid of the mouse because this video is going to be all text mode. So we'll start in a prompt. Let me actually start by typing the command dir and press enter, and show you guys that I have 7.5 megabyte in this folder. So let's sort this by size, and we can see that I have a database. The database is 2.5 megabyte. There are currently, you see, if I do navi .exe, you can see there are currently in this version 3 different environments supported. So the navi.exe is a DOS program. So the client running on the DOS. Navi2 is the client running on the OS2. So if I try to start that one, we will get an error saying that this version of Windows do not understand OS2. Early version of Windows NT actually understood it. So if I run the DOS version, I get the same result. So the last one, Navi-N, is the Win32 version. That was not part of the initial release because Win32 did not exist in 1990. So we only had the 2. But when Windows 95 came out, we got a version of the executable for Windows 95, and it's actually that version we're going to run. But before that, I want to show you one more thing. So if we look at the files called server, we can see that we have the same 3 files. So this version was a true client server software architecture. The server handle all the databases, and this is basically the native database that we have all the way up till financials or Dynamics Nav 2009 R2 was the last version that supported the native database. So the database we have here, that's the native database. But let's get into it. So I'll clear the screen and I'll type Navi-N. And we're met. See how lightning fast that started. So running a 30-year-old piece of software on a modern machine really works very well. This is lightning fast. So we're met with the main menu, or not really the main menu, the startup menu. So we have the cool Navision logo at the top. Things are not quite aligned up here just because this was designed for programs actually running in true text mode 80 by 25. And I found something that looked a bit like that running in a full screen with the new Windows terminal. So bear with me, this is the best I could manage to get it to look. One thing that you can see, there's a menu. I used the arrow keys to menu. So this version, beware, is so the software was originally Danish, and I have had the Danish version, and I've shown that to many people. Some of you might see me demo it for you at some point, but I really didn't want to do the video on the Danish version. I wanted to do it on an English version, and it turned out to be a challenge to actually locate an English version, but I did. But this is you could say that this is the Danglish version, meaning that this was the Danish version translated by the people in Denmark to give out to companies that will then localize it to whatever local accounting scenarios they had, and also update the language to make sure that the words were the correct ones. So you will see some words and things I've not seen that used for that word in Navision or in Dynamics Nav or in Business Central, and just take it as the fact that this was the very, very first draft of the English language layer. So accounts are actually companies, and we did not have anything called Kronos. We had just this called demo account, and demo was the old word for Kronos. So if I try to change the name, saying, hey, you cannot change if there's demo in the name, just like we have issues with Kronos today. Other things that we have in this menu is the ability to make a backup and import a backup. We can handle users, and users look surprisingly like the users we have today, permission sets and all that. So the concept of super was born here. Design, I'll get back to design in a minute. Setup is mostly, if somebody have played with when they use the classic client, we have the concept of the soup file, the setup file, and in this case it didn't really have that name, but it's the same file we're talking about. You set up what kind of monitor you're using, or VGA, EGA, mono, CGA, or black and white. You set up what kind of keyboard you had. Was it an AT type of keyboard with 12 function keys, or was it just a PC keyboard with only 10 function keys? And how many lines when you're doing print screen? So print was line based because printers were matrix printers, so they printed line by line. We got an automatic logout. That was pretty cool. Something that we actually lost later, and then we regained it. And the last one, database maintenance. Well, this is where you select the database you're using, or you create a new one, or you expand the size. So the concept of the native database was a pre-allocated size. And you can see up in the, up there, you can see it says DB 30%. That means in the 2.5 megabyte we have, that 30% are available. Right next to that you see 4 dots and kilobytes. That's because we're in the Win32 version where memory is virtual, but if we were in the DOS version, it will actually tell you how much available memory we have left. We can also see that also already the concept of commit cache was here. So this is basically the database technology that was built in the late 80s, and it survived all the way up to 2009, which is pretty cool if you ask me. Okay, so let's get into it. I will go up to accounts and I will open the demo account, and now we're met with the main menu, and the main menu tells the story of what modules we actually have in the product at the time. The 5 columns are kind of a predecessor to the original structure we had in Navision Financials. But let's take a look at it. We have a chart of account, of course. And that looks like a chart of account. You can see the from sum to sum, and here it's the totaling is called summing up, but it's the same concept. And and still it's it's lightning fast. The key system here, if I press F1, we can see that we get the key help, and if I hold Control down or Shift down, we can see exactly what functions are available on this screen at this exact field where the cursor is. The basic principle was something called ISA, which was I guess it was IBM who at least championed that. So insert was always F3, help was F1, F10 was the menu, F4 was delete, and so on. So there were kind of standards, and those standards basically survived up on in the classic client. So they were born here, meaning that if I press F6 on the balance, we will get to the GL ledger entries, and we can see what makes up this sum field. So I do the same thing here. I get the exact same feature as we have today. So whenever we're on a flow field, it was not called flow field at this point. You could drill down and see what entries made up the field. So the exact same thing. We can see we have a filter at top. So GL, pretty much the same. Here, let me show you something that's very cool that we actually lost. This was the last version where we had this in. So let me go to the budget. And you can see here we got a budget. And I have infinity scroll on baby. It locks at 1980, but I can just scroll, and if I move the let's see where I put the button in 2020, so you can see the indicator at the bottom of the screen. So if I do Control left, I can move the periods around, and then we just got infinity scroll, which is pretty cool. No reason to set up and next and all the thing. We just had a matrix that just worked, and then we could go up and move the cursor over here and do whatever we need and move it back in here. So a very, very intuitive and easy to use matrix form type, window type. Let's go out. So customers, exactly as we know it today. So you can see up in the menu, when we're on a cart here now, next, previous, insert, delete, everything is as we know it. We can do filters just as we know filters today, nothing different. We can do calculation filters or totaling filters. We have zoom, the good old zoom function, with all the fields. And if we take a look at this, we can see that the fields here are at least to a certain degree very, very similar to what the fields we have today. When we get into the designer, we can take a closer look. But most of the fields that were in this version are still in Business Central. Even the funky fields like the telex field, we still have that, even though telex is something that basically got lost in almost in the 80s. The search name field was because in this version, searching on the text field was not case insensitive, so we had the search name to make it easier to search. We can go and see. So for some reason they decided in this version that a list should be called a survey. So we get the survey, and then we have the customer list, just like we know it by pressing F5 in the classic line. In Business Central, they finally turned it around, so you get to the list first, and then you can go to the cart. But in this version, it was the opposite. So you can page up, page down, and then you can go to the list if you want to look for it. But more or less the same. And going on, so vendors were called suppliers, and the exact same thing. So one interesting fact about when they actually created this was that at some point the supplier system, the vendor system, was basically just made as a carbon copy with reverse sign from a finance perspective, with a reverse sign of the purchase module. So they were more or less identical, which I think was a pretty wise decision, not trying to make them different. Products, well, we know them as items now, same thing as we have today. We have something called a product group, and I don't really have anything in here. So see what I did there. I've totally changed my way of typing. So I typed the tab key where enter is actually the proper key now. So you need to type enter to jump. The idea behind product groups, and product groups never made it to financials. I have asked around and nobody knows. So if you know, I would love if you would put it down in a comment and tell me what happened to product groups. I know that it was not very popular and not many customers used it, but it was still a prominent thing to go away. Then we got resources and jobs, and they are very much alike what we have today, although the job budget is very different. I think we'll get back to that in a second. The booking column, we got the general ledger, the item ledger, BOM ledger. So very, very simple BOM-based production was supported. Actually worked quite well. This you can compare it to what we have today with the assembly orders, but it was just in a ledger. It worked very well, and we made a lot of customizations around this to support light production. Product group ledger goes, of course, with the product group. Resource ledger and job ledger are basically the same as we have today. The sales module, very, very simple. Let's go and create a sales invoice. Just and I can press F6. And now what happens here is that because this is the first time I have pressed F6 in this actual field, the system will tell you, but Eric, we have two different places where we can two different windows we can use to let you select, in this case, a customer, either the customer card or the customer list. So I could go with the list and say, this is what I'm going to use. I could say that, and this is for all the times where I want to look up a customer. But I could say that this specific version, I would actually use something else. So now I get the list and I can select a customer. And I press tab again. I should stop pressing tab in this video. And now it's tab T for today. But since this is a demo company, at this time, what Navision did was saying, okay, when you're in a demo company, everything works, but you can only do transaction in January and December. So I guess that's what we have to do. So let's do January 1st, 2020. And as you can see, there's only the header of the sales invoice on screen. So what we needed to do was go into the menu and select lines, and then we get to the lines and we can say product, do an F6 and do the same thing again, that I would like the list, and let's sell some whiskey, 10 of them, unit is bottle. So we have in this version we did not have a unit of measure thing going on. So I press F6 and then I get to the standard text table, which is the fallback lookup for text fields. And I could add something else, cabinet. So I don't know why whiskey and cabinets are in the same demo database, but that was how it is. And I can post, and I can either do, let's see, I think I remember it as F8 exactly. It was a F8. So I can post this one. Post, yes, or book. Boom. So lightning fast. But hey, when you work on something that's where the computer is 25 years newer than the software, it's lightning fast. So we did an invoice. We can go down in the posted invoice and find the one we just did. We have the navigate function. So you can see up in the menu we have navigate, and then this is basically the exact same thing as we have today. So we got GL entries, custom entries, product entries. So in this version we did not have the detailed entries. We'd only have custom entries, no detailed entries, no value entries on the product. So everything was done in the regular entries. Again, I hit enter and I go to the GL ledger entries here. Excellent. So purchase, same as sales. I won't really spend any time on that. So in the last column, that's the most interesting column actually. So we have 5 different things here. And the first one is reports, and you're gonna love this. I love this. This is so cool. So I go into reports and you see the menu changes come up in top, and then the menu looks like matrix printer paper with the tractor feet holes on the side. This is just you know, this is just awesome. So like this is 90s as good as it gets. And we can do a you know, a balance, and I think we need let's see what date format we have here. I print the screen. Boom, we got a report. Looks beautiful. And watch and notice all the lines and the boxes, because this is how a report looked at that time. This is just, it's very nice. We could print to a printer, of course, or we could print both to the screen and a printer, because printers were sometimes slow. So when you print to a printer, when you were working in these environments, there were the concept of a printer driver in the operating system was unknown. So the printer was sitting in a port, and so each program would have to know printers, and so that also was the rule for Navision. So in this case, these are all the printers that we have in Navision. So, and there are some classics. So the IBM Pro Printer, I love that thing. It was a copy of the Epson FX80, but the IBM one was nicer, I think. We had support for PostScript through some way of downloading first a PostScript setup, and then you can just print the text afterwards, and everything became PostScripted. We supported LaserJets because, hey, that was the new cool thing in the 90s, that you could print to a laser printer instead of the matrix printers. We'll see so this is actually an object type. I'll show you that in a bit. But otherwise, you would select the printer, saying that I'm going to print to the Pro Printer, and my Pro Printer is sitting on my LPT2 port, and then I'm not going to hit start here because then everything will probably blow up. But if I wrote a file name, then it will just print to that instead. There we go. So this is reports. Then we could actually access the layout of again, that's just the menu. We could set up batch printing, so we could mark a set of reports and then print them all in one go. Pretty cool. And not actually something I think we're able to do. We can schedule a single report. It's not like we can mark 5 reports, dang, and then just print it. But we could in this version. So that's another thing that we lost. So that's printing, and I just love the layout of this menu. It's simply beautiful in my mind. It's yeah. Anyway, so going on, the next version, the next menu item is called information. This was kind of the more setup. So this is a combination of setup and some stuff that couldn't fit the first one, I guess. Company data, we know that one. It's very simple at this time. Accounting data is the general ledger setup. So you can see here now that there were no concept of number series in this version. So everything, all the numbers of for sales and purchase and stuff like that were directly here, which the problem with this design is that if you had a high level of transaction, everything went into this table, but the native database had, whenever you would write to a table, you will actually log the entire table. So it didn't really matter if you put it out in separate records, because as long as they were sitting in the same table, you have the same kind of log. But when we switched to SQL, getting the number series into separate records would mean that the logging of getting numbers would totally change. But in this version, all the numbers were just here. User data, we actually know this one. Allowed book posting allowed to and from, log time. You can assign a different main menu to users if you wanted to. Periods, the exact same thing as we know. There was no concept here of the inventory periods. But other than that, this is the exact same thing. This version just supported VAT. There was no concept of sales tax. The US version, of course, had a sales tax concept, but in this version, it was just all VAT. Dimensions, a whole lot of things. So in this one, you had 2 dimensions. End of story. Departments and projects. That's it. Let's see what else is interesting here. I think one thing I'm going to mention is actually, you can see that the title for this column is called time job, and again this goes back to the Danglish translation thing. So this is half Danish and half English. So the jobs module had a very different name in Danish, and the origin of the module was actually mostly in companies, accounting companies that need to record their time, in lawyers' offices that need to record the time, and the process was called time job if you had the Danish word for it. So that's how it was born, and in this version you can still see it. So one thing that's interesting here is the job budget, because the job budget was and this was actually the same up until I think it was Financials 5.0 that got the new job budget with the job task and so on. But in this version you had a main activity, the secondary activity, and the part activity, and the combination of those 3 was the primary key of the budget, which was really annoying as soon as you wanted to use it for something else. So that changed, thankfully. Anyway, moving on. So in this version we also have the concept of batch jobs. So we saw reports, and a report is actually printing. So we know now in both in financials and in Business Central and in Dynamics Nav that we have a setting on a report called process only. That did not exist here. So we actually have 2 different object types. We both have report and a batch job. And a batch job is basically a process only report. Stuff like exchange rate adjustments and sales price suggestions and all that kind of processes. I don't know if, yeah, there's a couple more down there, including date compression. And date compression is, well, I guess it's still, at least there's date compression in financials, and then there were date compression in certain version of Nav. I'm actually not sure if it still is in Business Central, but the idea of compressing ledger entries into a totaling entry for a specific period, because in this day and age, right now it doesn't matter, size doesn't matter on databases, but it did at that time, so you could compress your data. Moving on, so printers, this is basically just the abilities of saying that when this user is printing this report, use this printer. So we still have this exact table in Business Central today called printer selection, and it's slowly regaining purpose with the new cloud printers, but it was here. So that's a quick run through of the UI and the application. So now I want to dive into what is known as design. And design is, so whether I go from here or I go from here, it's the same thing. So we'll just stay in here. So design is the object designer, and we have the following object types: tables, in this case called files, windows, so that's UI, functions, that's basically code units, menus is what you see on screen right now. So defining the menu, reports, we already saw a bunch of the reports, the batch jobs, the reports that then print. Importing, so importing is basically what we had back in financials and in Dynamics Nav Classic, or that's the data ports. And the last one is printers. So actually let's start with that one just to get that out of the way. So we can see here we got the printers again, and I can choose my IBM Pro Printer as an example, and we can see the default write to something, download, spool, and I can go down here and check the character conversion table, and I can see that in order to print an arrow ASCII character number 26, I need to do an escape as ASCII 27, and then the 94 and the 26. To print a capital A, I need to print a capital A. So printers were pretty simple. There were certain characters that needed special commands in order to work. Then you can also do formatting. So to do bold on an IBM Pro Printer, you needed to do escape 69, and to stop doing bold, you need to do escape 70. And double strike 71 and 72, and underline was a bit more complicated because it was 2745-1 and 2745-0 to reset it again. But that meant that you could specify in a report that something should be bold, and then it will go through this translation table in order to print nicely. We can see if we take the PostScript printer that it has a download file, so it has actually a big file that will set up PostScript, and then you can just print normally, or as normal as you can do. So the character table is, some of it is weird, some of it is normal. Like if you want to print a backspace, you have to print 2. And the commands for building up the lines and pages and reports and bold and so were actually, so PostScript is basically a programming language for designing print. So everybody knows PDF today. So PDF is a portable PostScript document. And in this case, the printer driver would simply generate PostScript for us. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, so with that out of the way, let's take a look at the table, and let's take a look at, we can see something. Let's go and find table 18. So that would give you a warm, fuzzy feeling, because the customer table in Business Central is still table 18. It was table 18 here. Let's take a look at the fields. We got the number field is 1, the name is 2, search name 2. So we can see that this is the same. The length, some of the fields are shorter then than they are now, but most of these fields are exactly the same. And if you go to, let's go here. So you see department code, that would be global dimension 1 now, but if I go and press F6, we can see that there's a file relation to department. So the fact, still in Business Central today, you can do a table relation from a field just to the table, not specifying a field. So in this one, we never specified what field in the table. We're just saying that this field has a relation to that table. That table better have a primary key that matches the field, because otherwise everything will blow up. And that concept still works in Business Central today, which I find pretty cool. So we can see that this is recognizable. You define the keys, just the same thing. You define the sum fields, as it was called at that time. There's some common to all accounts, common to all companies. If you want to do date compression, you need to set that up. And you could have a write protected. Let's see if something is actually, you see, in this case, customer entry is write protected, because only something that has been allowed to write in this table could do it. So a normal user could never access it. Either you needed a special license key, or you needed an object compiled with a special license key. One thing that was in this version and has never made any other nav version or Dynamics, which is strange, because this is awesome. Let me show you. Actually, let me show you on table 36, sales header. We still know this one, everybody. Field transfer. So what you did was saying that when you're on a sales header, you could define a field transfer from customer, meaning that if we wanted to transfer field from a customer to the sales header, this is the list, saying the name in sales header should be equal name in customer, and name 2 should be name 2, and so on. So you set up the transfer list, saying the fields that we have here, we need to move here, is defined in here. This is an awesome function that makes, we don't have those fields, something equal something, field is something equal for something, because you just define it in here. And from the header to the general ledger line, to product ledger line, and so on, it's an awesome function. And I wish that Microsoft would bring this function back, because it was really nice to have. So again, something that we actually lost. The last thing we have up in the menu is called post-processing, which is a very accurate translation of the Danish name, which I won't try to get into a translation discussion here. But what post-processing actually is the code behind. So again, like if you press F9 on the object in the old one, so we can see that here is on insert. It was called create at this time. And we go down on delete, on modify, we had something called the special relations, meaning that in case we wanted to look up to something that was not available through the normal lookup, we had a way to. This is basically the grandfather of for the on lookup, and then we have validate code. So this is, even though it just say the field name, this is all validate code on fields. And let me show you another very cool thing. So you can see that there's a lot of validate code, but there's also a lot of empty ones. So we could actually go up here and then say, okay, I only want to see the ones that actually has data in them. So remove all the empty ones. So that makes it easier to navigate. That's pretty cool. Another thing that we had here was, when I go variables, it says internal variables, and in this version there were only global variables. So some of the code that's still in Business Central today, where you have a code unit that or record that is littered with global variables, it actually came from here, because what happened was that when Navision at the time were working on the financial product, the new environment, the new client and all that was not ready. So they actually built a large part of the new financials application right in this one, and there were no local variables, so they built it as you had to in this one with globals. So when you find something with global variables, it actually originated here. So let me show you something. So if I add in a new variable, let's call it YouTube. There we go. So we have a new variable. So what I had was, up in this menu, I had something called test AL code. So the interesting thing is that this code was actually called AL, and then it turned to CAL in financial, and now we're back to AL. But if I hit F8 here, or do the test, my code compiled, and there was a dialog, and it was very, very fast. But let me show you. So if I go back to variables, you can see now that the first column has these marks on it, all but the one that I just created. So what we actually had here was the same, but you have used all these. This one you have not used. And this is something that we also lost, and we only just got it back with the code analyzer in Business Central, but financials never did it, Dynamics Nav never did it. So pretty cool function. So let's get rid of, I'm not going to save this object anyway, but let's get rid of this one. But let's take a small look at the code, and let's, you see this line, this is a great example. So it says db getrec parentheses begin customer comma delivery number. And if we were to write this today, we would say customer.get the deliv number. So what they did, so this is basically the same statement, but they changed the syntax to support a more object-oriented formatting, but in reality it was the exact same thing that happened behind the scene. So these two lines do the same thing, it's the same amount of information, but that's how the code looks. So if we some of them change. So if you go up here and look, it says db call field code. So this is actually validate. db transfer fields, we just talked about that one, pretty cool. You can see db set range, and in this case you see db set range, and then you just got record dot field. So it was actually the set range ended up having the same number of parameters, but the record was just part of the DB set range, but which is kind of funny because now we're getting back to that we only need to specify it with the coming versions of Business Central. DB modify rec. What we had also, if I'm pressing F5, I'm getting the F5 menu. So I get all my internal variables, external variables, meaning that the external variables are the one that's given to me by the system, some trigger codes, and then I got all the functions that we know, just with slightly different names. Some of them are exactly the same. Evaluate for converting text to numbers, format, clear. So in this version it will call, call report, not report.run, but same thing. DB get filters, DB copy filters, DB set filter, set range, commit. So as you can see, these are all the same functions, just with a slightly different naming convention. And classicals like date to DMY and date to DWY and working date and normal date, today, time, all that we got. The string functions are exactly the same. Max string length, we already had that. So in general, the language haven't really changed that much, apart from the syntactic sugar, changing it to appear to be object oriented, even though it's not really object oriented, it's just a different syntax. And of course, if we were on something, so we were on sales header, then I press F6 and I get the fields, and then I press enter, and that thing is copied down. And not to put down any versions of financials or Dynamics Nav, but this worked every time. So that was the classic way for people to learn to program in this was F5 something, then F6 something, enter and do something, and then F5 and F6, and yeah, it was like the keys with the fingers were always sitting on F5 and F6. So I think that's enough. Let me not save this. So that's a table. So a window was different. Let's do a simple one. We can start with let's go and find window number 21, the customer card. So we select a table, we say we want a frame and we want a heading, and that's all good. We can define a menu, saying what menu items should we go and where should those take us to different windows or somewhere else. And if you see the last two here, program, what is that? That's actually calling something else. So an external program. Macro, that's another thing that we had in this version and never got in somewhere else. So what we haven't really looked at it yet. Up in the top, when we have something called general, up in the upper right corner, so right there, where we could of course specify the work date, and that's the same thing as today. We can go in and change the colors, move windows around, but we can also work with macros. So what is a macro? A macro is basically a keyboard program. So you record keystrokes and action, and then you can either play them or we can incorporate them into a menu. So if you have something that you need to do a bunch of times, then you could just create a macro to do it. You also have, there's actually a calculator, 5 plus 6, and then I need to do something, and I can't remember how to do this. 5 plus 6 is 10. This works exactly like a classic accounting calculator, and I never got the hang of that. So let's get out of that one. We have a calendar where you're able to highlight dates and put something on it. This is just for you. It's just sitting on your client. Of course, there's a debugger, and then you can say operating system. And why would you do that? And that was because when this thing ran on DOS, you were the only program running. So if you might need to go out, and I don't know if you noticed the curtain. That was pretty cool. So it will start a prompt, and then you could go out and do something, and when you're done with that, you would exit, and then you're back into the system. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, we got sidetracked here. I'm sorry about that. So in this case, we're looking at the window designer, and this is the menu, and you can specify if there's certain filters that needs to be on the menu item. The exact same thing we have. You can specify the key, shortcut key. So I jumped over editor, and I'm going to go into the editor. So here is the card, and I know that it's very hard to see on the video where the cursor is right now, because it's just, you know, a blinking line, unfortunately. Anyway, so now I place the cursor right on the salesperson, and I can press F3 and say, okay, I want name 2. I add name 2, so I get name 2, and I get both the caption and the field. So I can do now, I can press space so I can align it, enter, save layout. So if I go back, I have name 2 now on my screen. So pretty nice, pretty easy, pretty flexible, and you can design the screen how you want it. You can define a tab set, so how you should navigate through the page. Let me show. So if you remember the awesome matrix page for the budget, and if you remember in Business Central, the budget is actually page 113. So let's go and look at 113. Finance budget is a matrix. So let's see how you define such a complicated page as that one. Well, we tell that this is a matrix type, and we tell what table it's used, and we tell that it should be date. So the flow filter to use is the date filter field. Date delimitation is it's called here. Okay, so that's the setup, and then we get to the complicated part, the editor. And this is all there is. So we have put 4 fields into the editor: number, count type, name, and then the last field should be a sum field, aka a flow field, and that's it. So the matrix knows that the last field it's given is a sum field, and that's the one they need to do the whole matrix thing with. And we're told to use the date filter to limit it. That's it. Then we're done. Everything else the client takes care of. So if you look at the amount of code there is in page 113 to handle the budget, it's ridiculous, because here there's not even a behind the scene thing. That's it. That's what we have. So nothing else. That's the amount of work it takes to create a matrix window in this version. So again, something we lost, but this is truly awesome. Moving on, functions. You know these by heart. They have slightly different names, but you know, code unit 12 is the post general ledger line. And again, if we here's another thing, that this version supported the most beautiful comments. So you see these ASCII boxes with a comment. So the compiler knew that this is actually a comment. We can still do comments in this one. I keep moving the mouse. I'm simply a victim of, but this is a comment with the curly bracket, because the curly brackets was true Pascal commenting, so that's of course supported. But it also supported these nice functions. So GL account, post GL entry, post VAT to GL, customer, check document number, post customer ledger entry, post customer ledger entry to GL, post payment discount to GL, handling vendor, check document number, and so on. And now we are already at almost down at the auxiliary functions. So this is simple, this was effective, and I love it. We can see here another thing that's interesting. In this one, DB find rec. So this is just DB. This is table.find. So with the find first for the minus and the plus, there were no first and last and so on. It was just the find function we had in this version. The other function came as the need to optimize the SQL access to make this language SQL compatible. But in this version, we just have find, and that's it. We can go down and see that it's not necessarily the exact same numbers for everything, but code unit 80 sales post and 90 purchase post. And then I think the last one is 337 navigate. That came the last function that was added was the navigate function. One thing I didn't show, let me go back to the tables for a second. So the last table we have is 450, but in reality the number series kind of stop with 220 for the business unit. So way less tables than we have now, but still, you can't doing something in Business Central without touching a table where the number is less than 220 is almost impossible, because these are all the important things and we have it. Menus, very simple. You define the menu just like we saw the menus on the window, so no surprise in this one. We have the main menu, the information menu, batch, jobs, design, and then the book menus. So we have already touched all those. Reports. Let me show you reports, because reports are pretty cool. Let's take a what should we do? Let's take the finance balance. So we get into the report, and then we can see that we have like sections here, and a section is there are different types. I can let's see if we allow. So I do an F3, and we can see we have different types. We have a request, meaning that's what we have now. Request page, header, a blank, a file import, loop, and transport top, transport bottom, or group heading, group totals, and filler. So all the components of a report. And in this case, you can see that some sections are indented. So in this case, we're running through the finance accounts, and then we're doing some processing, and the blank is just like an element because we already have the data. But what I wanted to show you, see all those beautiful lines and boxes. So what we can actually do here is I move the cursor, and now it's in the middle of the screen, just northeast of account name, and I go up and I say block, and then I define a block like this, for instance, and then I'll use the frame function. Hit the frame function, boom, I got a box. So I can do that again if I say block here, and I create a box, and then I go frame, I get a box. So it was crazy easy to create these nice boxes, and you see that what I did was actually across two sections. So it was very, very easy to create reports that just looked awesome with nice boxes around. And lots of people struggle trying to recreate reports that look like this in financials, and I don't think it was ever this easy. Of course, we still have code behind the scene, the exact same as we have anywhere else. Same functions, but yeah, very awesome report generator. Very user friendly. I'll exit out. Let's continue our walkthrough. So batch jobs are basically the same as the as a report, but just didn't print. You even had the same kind of sections, but it was just it was a natural thing to align them in one object type. I think that was the right move to do. So the last thing is an import, and if we create a new one, test import, you'll kind of see the same thing again, and then we will say that we're importing into country, and then we're not having all these blank lines, so we will start by importing the code and the name and the EC country field, and save that. And we have an interesting thing here actually to think about is that if for some reason imports did not have an object number, batch job didn't have no object numbers, reports no object numbers, menus did have, functions did have, windows did have, and files did have, but the other ones did not have object numbers. So on this, from this perspective, this one is ahead of the curve, because if you follow the discussion on object numbers, that's interesting. Anyway, so that kind of concluded the design part of this video, and I'm just checking. It's getting really past an hour now, so I think we are pretty much done. What I wanted to say is that this product had a huge impact on how and what you could do with an ERP system, because this was the first time that it was easy for customers and for partners to customize, and this thing got customized. You have no idea of the kind of solutions we came up with this thing. As I said, my very first job was taking this and integrating this with a point of sale system from IBM, and getting all those integration bits working, data in, data out, and transaction types and stuff like that. And it was suddenly possible, and still maintaining a standard ERP system. So I want to thank a lot of people, not by name, but just saying that there was a lot of people that made it possible for me to do this video and get me the bits, because I only had the Danish versions, and I would love to do a follow-up. If there's something more specific that you really want to see about this version, let me know in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel, that helps me a lot, but let me know if there's something that you want to see. Now I got this running, it's on my machine, and I can certainly show almost anything in it. I'm not gonna set up the networking parts, because that's probably gonna take forever, but let me know if there's something you want to see. But then until next time, have a wonderful day.